At my grandson's baby celebration, my daughter-in-law lifted the handmade quilt I had spent months stitching and gave it a thin, dismissive smile. Then she said, loud enough for the people filming to hear, "We really don't do homemade things in our home." And she dropped it straight into a recycling bin near the gift table. A few people laughed. The kind of laughter that only shows up when no one wants to be the first to call something cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just walked over, pulled it back out, smoothed it with my hands, and quietly placed it in my bag before leaving early. That night, my son called. His voice wasn't steady. "Mom," he said, "tell me what was sewn into that blanket." I sat at my kitchen table and held the bag beside me. "Why are you asking that?" I replied softly. And that was the moment everything started to unfold. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 67 years old. For more than 40 years, I ran a small alteration studio on Maple Avenue, fixing wedding gowns, repairing coats, teaching people how to make something last instead of replacing it the moment it frayed. Fabric tells the truth long before people do. I learned that early. My hands aren't what they used to be. Arthritis has made even simple stitching slow and deliberate. Some days I have to warm my fingers before I can hold a needle at all. So when I say that quilt took me months, I mean it cost me more than time. It cost me effort I can never get back, and I still made it anyway, because it wasn't just a gift, it was a promise. My husband, Walter, passed away less than a year before the baby was due. We had been married 42 years. He wasn't a loud man. He didn't believe in grand gestures. He believed in preparing for things long before they arrived, especially family and grandchildren. He used to say, "A good life is just patience, stored in different places." I didn't fully understand what he meant until after he was gone. A week before his final hospital stay, he asked me to bring down a small wooden box he had kept hidden in the closet for decades. Inside were savings bonds, old ones, carefully collected, year after year, birthday after birthday, small amounts, never missed. On the inside lid in his handwriting it said, "For the grandchild I never met, from Walter." I remember staring at him when I realized what it was. "Almost 50,000, he told me quietly. "Give it to them when the time is right." Then he added something I never forgot. "Don't just hand it over. Hide it somewhere they'll have to care to find it. Something they won't throw away without thinking." That was the last instruction he ever gave me about it. So I made a plan. After he passed, I started sewing. A soft cream quilt with a pale stitched border. In one corner, I embroidered his initials, WC, small enough that you would only notice if you were paying attention. Inside the lining, I created a hidden pocket. That's where I placed everything, the bonds, the letter he dictated before he passed. Words meant for a grandchild he would never hold, folded carefully, sealed, protected. $48,000 and a lifetime of intention, hidden inside fabric someone might call just handmade. Then I wrapped it simply and waited for the baby shower. My daughter-in-law, Lila, comes from a world where everything has a label that matters more than the thing itself. Designer this, luxury that, appearance over meaning. She wasn't openly cruel when I first met her, just distant, like she was trying not to touch something she considered temporary. My son, Ethan, loved her deeply. And when people are in love, they often stop noticing the small ways they disappear inside it. Over time, I saw him becoming quieter around her, smoother, easier, less likely to disagree. The kind of man who chooses peace even when peace costs him something important. Still, I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. And then the baby arrived, a boy, Noah. And suddenly everything became curated, a themed nursery, coordinated outfits, photos designed for approval rather than memory. And the baby shower wasn't really a gathering. It was a performance, a room filled with cameras, matching dresses, and people waiting for moments they could post later. I should have realized then that my quilt didn't belong in that world, but I didn't, because I didn't make it for their world. I made it for the child. When I arrived, I saw my son first. Ethan stood near the wall, holding a drink he wasn't really drinking. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. That should have told me everything. The gifts were opened one by one. Boxes with logos, carefully wrapped luxury items, everything admired for how it looked on camera. Then came mine, a plain package. Lila lifted it with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's see what this is," she said. When she unwrapped it, she paused, just for a second. Then she held it up. "It's homemade," she said lightly, like it was a joke she expected everyone to understand. A few people laughed. Someone behind her whispered something I couldn't hear. And then she walked toward the bin, still smiling, and dropped it inside. "We only keep designer things in this house," she added, almost playfully. That was when I stood up. I walked over, picked it up from the bin, brushed it off, folded it once, and placed it in my bag. Then I looked at her and said quietly, "That's all right. It wasn't meant for display anyway." And I left. That night my phone rang. Ethan's voice cracked as soon as I answered. "Mom," he said, "please tell me what was inside that quilt." And I knew then that something had already begun to break open. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry. Anger would have been simpler. It was something else. The feeling you get when you realize a moment didn't just happen. It splits something open that cannot be closed the same way again. Around midnight, I took the quilt out again. It still smelled faintly like the place it had been thrown. Paper, plastic, a trace of something artificial and sharp. I sat at my table and ran my hands over the stitches. Every line reminded me of why I had made it carefully. For protection. Inside, everything was still there. The bonds and letter. Untouched. That mattered more than anything. Because what Lila had thrown away wasn't money. It was a moment of truth she hadn't even recognized. The phone rang again before dawn. Ethan. This time his voice wasn't just shaken. It was fractured in a different way, like something inside him had finally stopped holding its shape. "I talked to Aunt Margaret," he said. Margaret was Walter's sister, the only one who ever really understood him. "She told me everything," Ethan continued, "about the savings, about the letter." I closed my eyes, so it had already begun spreading. Truth always travels faster than comfort. "She said it was inside the quilt," he added. "Mom, tell me it's not gone." "It's not gone," I said. "It's here." I heard him exhale like he had been underwater. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something quieter. I watched her throw it away. That sentence landed heavier than anything else. "I saw it happen," he repeated, "and I didn't stop her." I didn't interrupt. Some things need space to exist fully before they can be understood. After a while, I said, "Do you know what your father used to tell me?" Ethan didn't answer. "He said people think regret is loud," I continued, "but it isn't. It's quiet. It sits down next to you and doesn't leave." A pause. Then, "What do I do now?" That was the first real question, a question that had weight. "You tell the truth," I said, "all of it." There was a long silence on the line. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "Then I want to see you." That afternoon, he came alone. Just my son standing in my kitchen, like he wasn't sure whether he deserved to be there. I placed the quilt on the table. He stared at it for a long time before touching it. "You really put it inside?" he asked. "Yes." His fingers stopped at the seam. "The money?" "Yes." "And the letter?" "Yes." His breath shook. "My father—" He started, then stopped. "I know," I said gently. He sat down like his legs had forgotten how to stay upright. "I laughed," he said suddenly, "at the shower. I smiled. I didn't even ask her to stop." I didn't respond immediately. Because this wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding the weight of what silence costs. "I didn't know," he said again more urgently. "I didn't know what it was." "That's not the part that matters most," I told him. That made him look up. "The part that matters," I continued, "is what you knew before you knew." He went still, because he understood. Truth doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in layers you can't ignore anymore. After a while, he asked, "Is it still possible to fix it?" That question, that hopeful human instinct, to repair what has already shifted. I looked at him for a long moment. "Some things," I said carefully, "aren't fixed. They are handled." He swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means your father didn't leave this as something to be protected by accident," I said. "He left it to be revealed." Ethan's eyes dropped back to the quilt. For the first time, he wasn't looking at fabric. He was looking at intention, at time, at decisions made years before he even understood he would be standing here. "I want to make it right," he said quietly. "You will," I replied, "but not the way you think." That evening, I made a decision. The bonds needed to be secured properly, not dependent on anyone's interpretation of what family handling should look like. I contacted the bank first, then a trust advisor, then a lawyer who specialized in inheritance protections for minors. By the end of the week, everything was transferred into a locked education trust under the baby's name. Irrevocable, protected, untouchable until adulthood. When I told him, he didn't argue. That surprised me. But maybe it shouldn't have. Grief has a way of teaching people the shape of consequences very quickly. "What about Lila?" he asked. I paused before answering. "That depends," I said, "on what she does next." Because this wasn't finished. Not yet. Something had already been exposed. But exposure is not the same as understanding. And understanding takes time, more than most people are willing to give it. I didn't plan a confrontation, not at first. Life has a way of forcing those into existence without asking permission. Ethan called again 3 days later. This time his voice had changed in a different way, not broken, not shaken, but sharpened. "There's something you need to see," he said. He didn't explain over the phone, just sent a link, a video. I hesitated before opening it, because sometimes knowing too much, too fast, doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you responsible. When I pressed play, I immediately recognized the room, the baby shower, the balloon arch, the polished tables, the carefully staged smiles. And there she was, Lila, holding the quilt, smiling into the camera. "I love my grandmother-in-law," she said brightly, "but we don't really do handmade things here. It doesn't match our aesthetic." Then she laughed, that small, rehearsed laugh people use when they want others to join in. And then she walked straight to the bin and dropped it. The video kept rolling. Someone laughed off camera. Someone clapped like it was entertainment. And Ethan, standing near the wall, didn't move. I stopped the video, not because I couldn't watch more, but because I didn't need to. Truth, once seen clearly, doesn't require repetition. Ethan arrived that evening. He didn't knock for long. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept. "It's online," he said immediately. "Yes," I replied. He nodded like he already knew that. "It's everywhere," he added. "I assumed it would be," I said calmly. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. He stepped inside and sat down without asking. "I didn't post it," he said quickly. "I didn't even know it was being recorded like that. It was Brooke, one of Lila's friends." "I know," I said. "I tried to get it taken down," he continued. "But people already downloaded it, shared it. I can't control it." "I know that too." He ran a hand over his face. "She's saying it was taken out of context," he said, "that it was just a joke, that nobody told her anything was inside it." I looked at him. "And do you believe her?" That question stayed in the air longer than anything else. Finally, he answered honestly, "I don't know." That was the first real fracture. "I told her about the bonds," he said suddenly. "After Caroline told me. I had to." I nodded slowly. "And?" He hesitated. "And she said it wasn't her fault." There it was, the sentence that revealed everything underneath everything else. "She said she was set up," he continued, "and that no one should expect someone to know something was hidden in a blanket, that it's unfair to blame her for not reading minds." I let him speak, because this part matters, not what happened, but how someone explains what happened after. "And what did you say?" I asked. He looked down. "I didn't defend her," he said. "For the first time, I didn't defend her." That silence between us changed something. Later that night, I told him what I had done, the trust, the legal structure, the protection of the funds. When I finished, he didn't look relieved. He looked excluded. "That includes me too," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "I understand." But he didn't say it easily, because understanding and acceptance are not the same thing. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Madison doesn't know about any of this yet," he said. "She will," I replied. And that was when I made the decision I had been circling for days. "I want her to hear it from me," I said. Ethan looked up sharply. "No," he said immediately. "If you do that, it'll explode." "It already has," I replied calmly. "We're just deciding how honestly it lands." He stood up, paced once across the room. "You don't know how she reacts when she feels cornered," he said. "I saw how she reacts," I answered, "at the shower." That stopped him, because there was no argument strong enough to rewrite that moment. He sat back down slowly. "So what are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "All of it, in one room, where it can't be edited, softened, or turned into something it isn't." He closed his eyes. "That's going to destroy her," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "Her choices already did that. I'm just making sure everyone sees it clearly." He didn't respond, because part of him already knew I was right. The Sunday they came, I woke early, not because I was nervous, because some days require preparation, the way storms require boarded windows, The house smelled like slow-cooked food and clean linen. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just warmth that didn't need an audience. I placed the quilt on the table in the dining room. This time, it wasn't a secret. It was evidence. Ethan arrived first with the baby. Little Noah, still too young to understand any of this, sleeping against his shoulder like the world had not yet introduced itself to disappointment. He looked at me when he stepped in. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No," I said honestly, "but it's still necessary." Then came Lila. She paused at the doorway when she saw the quilt. Just for a second, that was enough. Because recognition, even reluctant, always arrives before explanation. Behind her, her mother, colder, sharper, dressed like everything in life was an event she was judging, followed inside. And finally, Ethan's Aunt Marlene, who already knew more than she should have, stepped in without a word. We all knew this wasn't a visit. It was a reckoning waiting for language. We ate first. I insisted on it, because truth spoken to empty stomachs becomes louder than it needs to be. The conversation at the table stayed shallow. The baby, the weather, work, the kind of polite noise people make while waiting for something they know is coming. Lila barely touched her food. She kept glancing at the quilt, like it had started taking up too much space in her mind. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. That small movement changed the entire room. "I want to talk about the quilt," I said. Silence. Ethan exhaled slowly beside me. Lila straightened in her chair. "I already apologized for that," she said quickly. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know anything was inside it." "I know what you said," I replied calmly. Then I walked to the table and placed my hand on the fabric. "This isn't about what you thought it was," I continued. "It's about what it actually was." I reached for the seam ripper, a small tool, and yet it shifted the air in the room the moment I picked it up. Ethan tensed. Lila frowned. "You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be," she said. "No," I answered. "It already is what it is." And I opened the stitching. Inside was the envelope, then the stack of bonds, neatly bound, waiting. I placed them on the table one by one. "This," I said, "is $47,000. No reaction at first, then the shift. The kind that happens when people realize a mistake has scale. Lila leaned forward. "That was inside that?" she asked. "Yes." Then I placed the letter down. "And this," I said, "is the last letter written by your father-in-law before he died." The room went still in a way that felt physical. Ethan made a sound, not words, not quite emotion. Something caught between disbelief and grief finally catching up. Lila stared at the table, then at me, then at Ethan. "You're serious," she said. "Yes," I replied. Her face shifted, not into guilt, into defense. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "How was I supposed to know something like that was hidden? Nobody told me. You can't expect people to—" "I don't expect you to know," I interrupted gently. I looked at her. "I expect you to care before discarding." That landed differently. Ethan finally spoke. "You threw it away," he said quietly. Lila turned to him immediately. "I didn't throw away money," she said. "I threw away a blanket. I didn't know. That's not the same thing." "It was my father's money," he said. A long silence followed that sentence, because ownership changes tone, even in regret. Then Lila's voice sharpened. "So what now?" she asked. "You're punishing me for not reading your minds, for something I literally had no way of knowing." I watched her carefully, because this was the moment people reveal who they are under pressure. "No, Rhea," I said, "you already did the harm," I continued. "What happens now is about what we protect moving forward." I turned slightly toward Ethan. "The money has been placed into a trust for Noah," I said. "It cannot be accessed. Not by you. Not by Lila. Not by anyone here." His shoulders dropped slightly, like part of him already expected that. Lila's face changed. "That's not fair," she said immediately. "I didn't steal anything," she added quickly. "I made a mistake." I nodded. "Yes," I said. "You made a mistake with something that carried 30 years of someone else's intention." Silence again. Thicker this time. Then I placed the quilt back on the table. "It's going home with me," I said. Ethan looked at it, then at me, and nodded once. Lila didn't speak, because she realized disagreement wouldn't change the structure anymore. And for the first time that evening, Noah stirred slightly in Ethan's arms, unaware, untouched, still belonging to a future that had been carefully arranged without his permission. I looked at all of them, and then I said the only thing that mattered now. "This family will learn the difference between what is expensive," I said quietly, "and what is irreplaceable." No one answered. They didn't need to, because something had already been separated in that room, not people, understanding. And once that separation happens, it doesn't fully reverse. After that night, nothing went back to how it was. Just in the quiet way a house feels different after you move a single wall. The quilt stayed with me, and as a reminder that some things only survive if someone refuses to treat them as disposable. Ethan called the next morning. His voice was exhausted but steadier than before. "I didn't sleep," he said. "I didn't expect you to," I replied. A long pause followed. Then he asked, "Did I fail him?" He didn't say Lila. He didn't say the shower. He meant his father. That was the real question underneath everything. I held the phone a little tighter. "No," I said carefully. "You failed in moments, not in entirety." Silence. "That matters?" he asked. "It's the only thing that can be repaired," I said. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to live with what I saw," he admitted. "You don't live with it," I said. "You learn from it. There's a difference." That stayed with him. Over the following weeks, things shifted in ways that weren't dramatic enough for outsiders to notice, but obvious to anyone inside the story. Ethan stopped apologizing for speaking plainly. That was the first change. He started interrupting Lila, not to fight, but to stop conversations from sliding into denial. And Lila became quieter, just more aware that her version of events no longer controlled the room. She never gave me the apology I might have once expected. Instead, one afternoon, she stood in my kitchen, holding a small bundle. A hat, crooked, uneven, clearly handmade. "I tried," she said simply. I looked at it for a long moment, then at her hands. They were tense, like someone waiting for judgment. "That's how everything starts," I said, and I meant it. I took the hat, not because it was perfect, because it wasn't meant to be. The trust remained locked, untouchable. No arguments changed it. No emotions bent it. Walter's patience had become structure, and structure does not negotiate. Sometimes Ethan struggled with that, because inheritance always feels, to the living, like something they should be able to feel their way into controlling. He couldn't, and that was the point. Noah grew quickly, the kind of fast growth babies do when life is happening around them, whether they understand it or not. One afternoon, I placed the quilt over his crib. He reached for the stitched corner almost immediately. Ethan watched me do it. "You still think about Dad every time you touch it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "I do too," he admitted. Then after a pause, "I don't think I understood him when he was alive." "Most people don't," I said. "That's why some things are left behind in pieces you have to assemble later." He looked at Noah, then at me. "I'm trying not to be someone who needs tragedy to understand love," he said quietly. I didn't answer immediately, because that is a harder promise than it sounds. Finally, I said, "Then keep choosing the harder reaction while it's still small." Time passed, as it always does when something important has already happened. The video of the shower never fully disappeared. It lived its own life online, detached from the room it came from. Lila learned to stop reading comments. That, too, was a kind of growth. And somewhere in that slow reshaping of the family, something unexpected happened. Ethan started teaching Noah small things about his grandfather, stories of patience, of fishing lines and quiet mornings, of a man who saved in silence instead of spending loudly, the kind of legacy that doesn't fit in a caption. One winter morning, I sat by the window knitting again. Not a quilt this time, a sweater. Ethan came in holding Noah, now older, more aware, eyes following movement like meaning might be hidden in everything. He sat beside me. "You were right," he said. I didn't look up. "About what part?" I asked. "That some things only matter if you can't throw them away," he said. I paused my knitting, then nodded once. "Yes," I said, "but the harder truth is this. You don't always know what you're holding until after you've already held it wrong." He didn't respond, because that truth doesn't ask for agreement, only recognition. Noah reached toward the yarn. I let him touch it, just briefly, because that is how you teach someone the difference between ownership and care. And as I kept knitting, I thought about Walter, about how he had understood something most people don't, that love isn't proven in the moment you give it. It's proven in the moment someone realizes they almost lost it and decides after that not to look away again.